Hey everybody, I'm Nick Nicholas and this is my son Chris, and we're back. We want to spend some more time with you and help you understand a few things about how both of us found a way to go from various levels of darkness back to, if you will, to living a life of peace, which I think is important for all of us, particularly in today's environment. So I want to kind of pick back up, Chris, from where we left off. We were talking about the fact that what you had gone through, what with the Iraq, with the situation with both marriages, and how it had kind of taken you down a dark road.
Yes.
And I think we'd kind of agreed, and I think a lot of folks out there would agree, that everybody has experienced some level of negativity in their lives that have taken them down a road to where maybe they weren't clear as to how do I get back the happiness and the joy and the excitement that I was experiencing previous in life. And so we brought up that you and I had worked together with this information that I have, and you had utilized that through your story to help you come back. And I'm going to have you bring out a little bit more about that in just a little bit.
Okay.
But I think it's necessary. I kind of stopped short as I was giving my story as to, well, as a matter of fact, where I left it off was that basically I had worked with a Christian psychologist, and that's kind of where I left it. However, what really made a huge difference happened over the few years after I had stopped seeing him. First of all, I kind of want to explain why I spent that long working with him. Because basically he told me after maybe 8-9 months, he said, Nick, he said, you really, he said, your life is squared away. You don't need to keep coming to see me. And I said, well, Harry, and Harry was his name. I said, well, Harry, yeah, I could live the rest of my life this way. But over the last months, and since I saw the forces counselor in Boston, I said, I believe there's more that I can learn. And he said, well, if you're willing to learn, I'm willing to continue to work with you. And so that's why I worked with him for so long. I learned a lot of things from him. I learned a definition of fear. I learned how to calm that. I learned how to actually manage fear. He taught me a process and a mindset that I could literally make it so that fear did not control my life. Now, don't mean I don't feel fear, because I do. I'm human. It's an emotion. We can't stop it. But he taught me how to manage it. And I found that was a key in changing my life. Because he also taught me that my life is directed by my decisions. He said, you make a decision, it generates a feeling, and then that feeling is connected to emotion. He also taught me there's only two emotions, love and fear.
That's right.
And he said every feeling, and there's thousands of them, he said every feeling is connected to one of those two. Negative thought, negative feeling attached to fear. He said you also have to understand that every one of your decisions is made out of either fear or love. And I said, well, yeah, but the world isn't that romantic. He said, no, wait a minute. He said, I'm not talking about romantic love. He said, I'm talking about the love that you feel through the emotion of love in knowing that you're helping people. When you feel compassion, when you feel respect, when you feel that you're doing the right thing and trying to do the right thing. And he said, that's the emotion of love that I'm talking about. And little did I know then, I was about to learn something from two different sources over the next few years that brought all that together. And so what I want to share with you is that in 1982, in November of 1982, seems like interesting things happened in my life in November 68, so on and so on. So in November of 1992, I was a member of the National Speakers Association. I was had my own training consulting company, and I was a professional speaker. I was blessed to have Zig Ziglar as one of my mentors, and such a great man. And I mean, he had a belief in God that was probably stronger than most anybody I've ever met. I loved the man. I had a respect for him that was just enormous, and I'm sure a lot of people out there do too. But anyway, he was one of my mentors, and one of his colleagues, Wanell Teague, she worked with him for many, many years. Matter of fact, even after he passed, his organization lives on, and she's a part of that organization even today. But she had a program for professional speakers that she called Specify or Die. And basically what it was, you would go to Shepherd, Texas, spend 3 days with her, and I mean 3 14-hour days, everything being recorded on these little cassette tapes, and then you had homework at night to be prepared for the next day. It reminded me so much of some of my ops training when they refused to let you have any sleep. But that's another story. So my wife Darlene and I went down because she encouraged Darlene to sit through this with me. And so, but the whole idea was for her to help me identify what my specific skill or talent was. Because you see, God gave every one of us a specific skill or talent to be able to fulfill His mission for us. And her job was to help me figure out what that was so that I could mold my message to audiences around that. So mid-afternoon of the third day, I mean, I'm like wore out, and she popped a question to me that caught me off guard. She said, "Nick, why is it that you interact with people the way you do?" I have no idea what happened, but all of a sudden I just opened my mouth and I started talking. I rattled off, I don't remember everything I said, but I rattled off stuff for about 5 minutes. I looked over and Darlene, my wife, and Wanell were sitting there like, where in the world did that come from? And I noticed that when I started doing it, I blocked out the whole room. All I could think about was that I was talking. And it was almost like I wasn't the one speaking. And so Wanell looked at me and she says, "All I can tell you is your special talent is you read human energy." I said, "Okay, what's human energy?" She said, "I don't really know, but you read it." I said, "Well, I have no idea what it is." And I struggled with that for a number of years afterwards. And then my wife and I moved from Oviedo, Florida, because we'd gone from Atlanta to Oviedo, Florida, and from there we came to Arizona, to Sun City, Arizona. And more of that story, again, is explained in the book. We called it our Beverly Hillbillies move. Once you read the book, you'll understand why. However, I had shut down my training consulting company. I was tired of being on the road. I'd spent 22 years getting on airplanes, living in hotels and eating hotel food, being away from my wife. And which, by the way, she and I, in the 40 years we've been together, there have only been 3 days that we either didn't speak to each other face to face, or that we didn't have a lengthy telephone conversation. Always. We have never gone longer than 3 days. Part of it was the fact that I spent some time overseas doing a project for one of the major corporations. So anyway, we get out here, and I was just exhausted from that. And I spent we came here in January of 11. I spent all of 11 kind of getting my act back together and resting up and so forth. And in 2012, I was ready to go back to work again, but I didn't want to go back on the road. So I started working, doing some small business coaching with entrepreneurs, and then I wound up attaching myself to an organization to sell legal insurance, and I did that for a while as well. But again, I knew that there was something under there I was supposed to do. I just hadn't put a finger on it yet. I'm still struggling with this whole concept of what is human energy. I can tell you that I was aware of the fact that I could be walking down the mall, walk by someone, and if they were having a bad day, I could feel it. I could tell when they were hurting. And it brought me down a little bit. But I could also tell when somebody was upbeat and excited. And it wasn't just the smiles and so forth. I actually felt the energy connection. And I thought, well, maybe that's what Winnell was talking about. But I had no idea. Then, the thing that brought it all together, on Saturday, December the 12th, 2015, I had gone to a business meeting for the legal insurance. The company was Legal Shield. And I spent all day in the meeting, came home, went in my office, and I was working on a project on my computer, and all of a sudden everything started going dark. It was just going like this. Next thing I know, I'm in this tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel is this beautiful bright light, and I'm just being drawn into it. And when I got to it, the level, there's just no words to describe the love, the calm, the peace that I felt. All I wanted to do was just join that light and stay there. It was that type of a experience. All of a sudden, boom, it cleared, and I'm sitting looking at my computer. And it was like, what in the world just happened? But I felt so peaceful, so calm, I went ahead and worked on my computer for another 45 minutes. Walked out of my office, walked into our sunroom where Darlene was, and I asked what we were having for dinner, and she told me. And I said, I had a strange thing happen. Well, when I told her, she freaked out. Needless to say, we didn't have dinner that night. She took me to the hospital. They poked and prodded and this and that and the other. They couldn't find anything, so they held me over for observation. Now, because I'd been an athlete all my life, at that point I was wearing a pacemaker because my heart rate had gotten down to where resting it was like 32, and that's a little low. Mm-hmm. So Sunday morning, they came in, the lady from Medtronics came in, and she interrogated my pacemaker. I joked around with her. I said, well, do I still have a heart? And she was just dead serious, never said a word, got up and walked out of the room. Yeah, okay, well, she didn't want to work on Sunday, I guess. About that time, the nurse came in with this little bag of stuff that she wanted to hook into my IV. She said, before I can hook this up, you got to read this. And it was a sheet of paper with all these ways this medicine was going to kill me. I said, whoa, wait a minute, you ain't hooking that up. I said, I'm feeling great. I never felt better in my life. She didn't say anything. She walked out, and less than 5 minutes later, the phone beside my bed rang, and it was my doctor. He said, you don't know what you had last night, do you? And I said, no, I guess I don't. He said, you had what we call a lethal VTEC. And he said, what that means is the bottom part of the heart stops its normal beating, clenches up, and just quivers like a muscle does when you're lifting too much weight, and it forces all the blood back up through your heart through the valves. He said, once that starts, you've got 32 seconds to live. He said, when we interrogated your pacemaker, we discovered that it had paced the lower heart back to beating at the 20-second mark. He said, you were 12 seconds away from death. At that moment, I knew that that was the moment that I'd entered the light. And I just looked at the nurse and I said, hook that thing up. And because at that point, I knew that if God saved me at that point, there must be a reason for it. Mm-hmm. So, long story short, that was my near-death experience. My life changed completely after that. When I say changed completely, it was the way I saw things. All of a sudden, I started understanding things I'd never understood before. For example, Winnell had said, you read human energy. I didn't know what that was. Mm-hmm. I woke up one morning about 2 weeks after that, and the first words out of my mouth were, oh my goodness, could that be it? And I had this vision in my head. Human energy is spiritual energy. And I got to thinking, wait a minute. I saw that light, and it was love and calm and peace. What is light? Light is energy. You're an engineer, you know that.
I can vouch for that.
You can vouch for that. Light is energy. All right? This was it was so full of love and calm and peace. Wait a minute. Does that mean that God then is energy? Is God a superior energy force of love? Well, we all know that God is love. We've been taught that since we were little. So then, all of a sudden, I said, wait a minute. And at that moment, I actually had a vision in my head. I could see it in my head. I again saw the light, but I saw a a stream come from the light, and as if it were entering me through the heart. And I said, wait a minute. Does this mean that God lives within me through the emotion of love? Wow, that was a revelation for me. And then I said, but wait a minute, I've talked to my son. He's an engineer. I took physics, but I forgot as much of it as I possibly could. But he shared with me that energy has some specific qualities. Is that what you'd call them? That it changing form and so forth. But I said, he shared with me that you can't have just one side. If you got a positive energy force, you've got to have a negative energy force.
So you have, if you look at the law of thermodynamics, the first law of thermodynamics is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
It can only change positive, negative. It can change form from potential to kinetic. So you have the law of conservation of energy. So energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I remember sharing that with you.
Right. And so I'm thinking, okay, so what is the negative pole here? If the positive pole is love, what is the negative pole? Wait a minute. Okay, so love, emotion. Well, I know there's only two emotions, love and fear, so that must make fear the negative pole.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I'm saying, okay, wait a minute. Human energy then is the spiritual energy that we were born with. We have X amount of it. It can't be created or destroyed. And unlike the energy that we see out here that can either be potential or kinetic, human energy is primarily kinetic all the time. Kinetic meaning
working in motion.
Working and in motion. Because we never stop breathing, our brain never stops working, all of those things. Our thought process is always going on. So it stays kinetic, but what it does do is change poles from positive to negative. So I'm thinking, okay, if that's the case, let me think about this. Harry had told me my thought generated a feeling, my feeling was connected to an emotion. Okay, so I have a positive feeling, I get a positive thought, I get a positive feeling connected to the emotion of love. So then does that mean that when I make a decision out of that positive energy, that decision is made out of embracing God?
Mm-hmm.
I said, wow, that's a whole new concept for me. Because other than that, I always thought in terms of connecting with God, basically the five senses. I go to Mass, I see the crucifix, I see the pictures, I smell the church. Those are all external connections. But this other, what I just realized was my true connection to God is spiritual through the, quote, human energy or spiritual energy. And I thought, okay, this gives me a whole new perspective on what goes on in the world. Now, all of a sudden I had another thought. I remember hearing through church and so forth, being raised in the church, that God gave us free choice.
Yes.
Now, as I thought about that, I thought, okay, so I get up in the morning, I choose to either have sausage or bacon. Do you think he cares? I don't think that's the choice he was talking about. He don't care what I drive. He doesn't care where I work. He doesn't care what I eat. So what's this free will he gave me? And then it dawned on me. The free will he gave me was the ability to make a decision. And where did that decision come from? All decisions are made emotionally first. That's what Harry told me. So that means then, or meant to me in my mind, was he gave me the choice to either think positive and make my decisions based on his love, or think negative, feel negative, and make decisions based on fear. That was the choice, the free choice that he gave me.
And being the data-driven engineer that I am, I of course had to research it and could research it all the way back to the Greek psychologists, philosophers of 6th century BC that said the same thing. There's only two emotions, fear and love.
Mm-hmm. And I think you shared with me, they also said that all human behavior is driven by those two emotions.
That is correct.
So what that did was help me to understand how people make their decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to take this back from this point and let's talk about from when you were standing in that hotel room with that gun to your head. Because you're at that point where you have to make a decision. That decision is going to have a lot of effect. So share with me, at that moment, we were on the phone. I was talking to you on the phone.
Yes.
And you were telling me that you were going to do this, that you had to do this. And I was trying to give you all the reasons why you were worth staying alive.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you telling me?
There was no reason to stay alive.
Exactly.
You know, the emotional pain that I was in at that point was so strong that every option that you gave me, I had a million excuses why that wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I could not see how that could work.
Mm-hmm. And if I recall correctly, at that moment, I said to myself, this isn't going to work. He doesn't have enough, he doesn't feel that he deserves to live. I can't convince him that he does. So as I recall, I said to you, Chris, if you've made up your mind, I can't stop you.
Mm-hmm.
But before you do, I want you to remember something. As your father, I will be totally devastated.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy and Emily, your daughters, your children, my grandchildren, I said they are going to be totally devastated. Think about that before you pull that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened in your mind at that time?
So, I'm going to warn everybody I may get a little emotional because I can sit here right now in this piece and look back and say, you know, the devastation that I could have caused.
Mm-hmm.
I love my kids more than anything in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're older now. They've got their own lives. You know, Jeremy's, you know, married, and I've got 3 grandkids of my own. I made a decision then when you brought that up that they were worth living for.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to them shortly thereafter, and I made the promise to them that, you know, I told them, I was very open and honest, and I think 3 years ago, Emily was in her mid-20s, Jeremy was in his early 20s, so they were old enough for me to have this conversation with
Mm-hmm.
them. And I told them the struggle that I was going through. And I'm not trying to burden you, is what I told them, but you need to I think I need to share this with you because I need to make you a promise.
Mm-hmm.
And this promise will hold me accountable. And what I told them was, and I talked to them separately, is I promise you that I will not commit suicide. Which gave me, you would think, peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just promised my kids that I wouldn't commit suicide. Everything's hunky-dory. Let's go on with life. And it actually took that emotional pain that I was in
Mm-hmm.
and probably doubled it or tripled it.
Mm-hmm.
The pain the emotional pain was it was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But what that did is that made the pain of that exact moment in time to be worse than my fear of changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, I can continue this pain. No, this pain has got to stop. Well, I'm afraid to make changes. Well, I'm not scared anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make this, I'm going to try to change because this has got to go away.
Mm-hmm. Two things about what you just said. Number one, it's true that sustained long-term positive change never takes place until the pain of the present becomes greater than the fear of the change. And why do we fear change? Simply because
Unknown.
it's the unknown. You didn't know what was going to happen next. And oftentimes, if the pain isn't bad enough yet, our decision is, I would rather live with the devil I know than the devil I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we continue to live a less than happy life just because we're afraid to make that change. But you really do. And I can remember in my case, mine had, just like you, that morning in Boston, my level of fear had reached the point that my pain was so great. It was like I had chest pains. I was having trouble breathing. I was perspiring. It became so great. I said, I can't do this anymore.
And I've learned, as I've applied this and I've learned more about it, it doesn't have to be these really dark moments
No, it doesn't.
that you and I mean, somebody who's unhappy in their job.
Mm-hmm.
I hate my job. I hate my boss. They don't pay enough. Go get another job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid to leave what I got. I know, like I said, the devil I know what I have here. I don't know what I'm going to get over there. So we stay in this job that we don't like, working hours we hate that keeps us away from our families, pay that barely keeps a roof over our head and food on the table,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fear of unknown of what the next
Mm-hmm.
job is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be some big, deep, dark thing. It's something we face every single day.
Exactly. And it could be something, everybody experiences pain from a different perspective. And, there are folks out there that may be thinking, well, yeah, this emotional stuff, okay, that's fine. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But this whole concept of emotional pain, how powerful is it really? Well, I can remember when I went through the special training that the Army gave me, which, by the way, didn't even show up on my 201 file, my record. One of the things they taught us was that torture techniques, even though they may be physical and they may cause physical pain, they are more designed to cause emotional pain, to heighten that level of fear to the point that we are going to do whatever we can, because fear is generated when there is a threat to survival.
Mm-hmm.
And they raise that threat to survival to the point that whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. Believing that then they're going to let me go, which isn't going to happen anyway. So, but emotional pain is 1,000 times worse than physical pain. Harry taught me that. And so, two things. First of all, as you were sharing that, you relived it, didn't you?
I did relive it.
What we need to understand is that everything that happens in our life, the good, the bad, the ugly, is all recorded in our mind. Our mind is just a huge computer.
Mm-hmm.
All these events are recorded in living color, but they have an emotional soundtrack. Every time it's triggered, and we triggered it in this conversation, you relive the moment, but you don't relive it 30 years ago when it happened. You relive it as if it's happening right this very moment.
Right here.
All that pain, all that, everything comes back. And in a later podcast, we're going to talk about how to disconnect that emotional soundtrack, which allows us to provide and to give total forgiveness.
And I'd like to point out, because I would imagine that if people listen to this, some are saying, well, they're saying a lot of things, but I can never get rid of everything that's gone on in my life to have that peace.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. Okay. I'm living peace.
Mm-hmm.
I have not disconnected the soundtrack from all the video yet. But just because I haven't separated that yet doesn't mean, you don't have to have all your ducks in a row before you can have that peace. The peace comes along the path. You don't have that far to go
Mm-hmm.
to get to that point. And then once you get there, then you work on the other.
Mm-hmm. That's why I entitled the book, Reclaiming My Life, My Journey Back to God. It is a journey. You know, I said here a while back, just kiddingly, that there's a reason why we don't accept wisdom anymore. Number one, because there's no app for it. And number two, because we can't pull up to a drive-up window, buy $5 worth of it, and drive off. Because wisdom takes time and learning and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of this journey. But now I want to bring something out, because you and I have had this conversation. I'm going to go back for a minute. You had reached that point where the pain of the present was going to drive you past the fear of the change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sharing all these things with you
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Tell me how you were reacting to them and why you decided. Well, first of all, tell me how you felt about it, and then tell me how you made the decision to move forward.
The great thing is we can be totally honest with each other.
Oh, yeah. That's the only way you can be.
I thought you were full of BS.
That's okay. A lot of other people have too.
I am what they would call a right brain guy. I'm an engineer. I'm into data. I don't get into the psychological stuff,
BS, yeah.
which maybe it's not as much BS as I thought at one point. But I thought it was all BS. I wasn't buying it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the things that you were asking me to do, I didn't. Until we started looking at it as positive and negative energy, I can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand energy. When we started talking about the law of conservation of energy, and then the second law, entropy, that all made sense to me.
Do you want to share with our listeners what you mean by that, the second law and the
Entropy.
Entropy.
So
Okay.
the second law of thermodynamics states that a closed, isolated system, which we are a closed, isolated system. I can't give you my human energy.
Right.
I can't say I like his human energy and just reach out and take it.
Right.
You are a closed, isolated system, and so am I. So within a closed, isolated system, over time, everything's going to go to chaos.
Mm-hmm.
If just left to its means, look at the world. I think we can all agree the world is going to absolute chaos. Just
Getting a little
being
shaky.
left alone. There was a physicist, Erwin Schrödinger, that addressed the second law of thermodynamics and the idea of everything going to chaos with human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
He said that the emotion of love has totally turned the second law of thermodynamics on its head when it comes to the human energy part of it. So, okay, maybe this isn't psychological BS. Maybe this is got some scientific stuff to us. you know, different people buy into different things, and sometimes you just got to have that one little thing that says, you know, yeah, I can agree with that, and you take it a little piece at a time. So, like I said, initially I felt it was all BS, but then I started looking into it, and it started making sense to me. And when I looked at it, and I started looking at positive energy of love as God, and then the negative energy of fear, Satan, which also, you know, being a Christian, Satan is, you know, the father of all lies, fear,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's like a light bulb went off for me. And at that point, then I said, okay, I'm gonna give you a crack. Okay, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a crack, and I'll evaluate it as we go. And then as we went along, the crack got bigger, and opened it up for me.
And I'm glad you brought that out that way, because I'm sure we've got listeners out there who, some who really embrace deeply the whole concept of God and Christianity and all of that. Not everyone does. I think most everybody does believe in a higher power of some kind. Some call it God, some may call it something else. But the reality of it is, not everybody fully embraces that whole concept. But like you just said, if they don't want to do it quite that way, they can always look at it from the perspective, like you did at that point, about positive and negative energy, without putting any type of spiritual connotation to it.
Open the crack just a little bit. Look at it from a strictly energy standpoint if you need to, and then as you go down the path, evaluate every bit of it and see if you don't come to the same conclusion that we did.
And that's basically part of our journey. And everybody takes it different. Everybody takes that journey in a different way.
If you look at my journey, A to B straight line, mine's, and I'm still out here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, we're all that way. You know, it's interesting because I would like to say, wow, once I understand this, boom, everything's going to be just great. Doesn't work that way. Change is a 3-step forward and 2-step back process. Mm-hmm. We'll talk more later on why that is in later podcasts. But the reality of it is the understanding to begin with and why this stuff works. We'll talk more about that. Pardon me. And so I think at this point, we've shared a good bit of information, things that folks kind of need to be thinking about. Mm-hmm. And as we go
it's
forward,
a lot to take in a short 40-minute period.
I don't think anybody can do that. I mean, let's put it this way. I started working on this stuff in 1981. I still work on it today. Mm-hmm. One last thing I'd like to say before we wrap this up. I've had clients of mine tell me, Nick, how does it feel to never have fear? I have no idea.
I don't either.
Because there will always be fear. Fear is an automatic emotional reaction to threat to any portion of our life that we consider critical. Our life, of course, relationships, money, our professional life, our spiritual, on and on and on. Anytime there's a threat, automatic response is fear. And in later podcasts, we're going to talk about how do we manage that fear so it doesn't control our life.
Exactly.
And that'll be coming up in our later podcast.
Awesome.